Big Dinosaur Dommy Mummy is back. This time around, she leads the Stampede, being an 8-mana 12/12 legendary Elder Dinosaur with Trample and an ETB effect that would make Atraxa blush. When Ghalta Stampede Tyrant enters the battlefield, drop Trowel and be like a dog on the table. I mean, when Ghalta Stampede Tyrant enters the battlefield, put any number of creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. This card has no cast restriction. It simply does what it says when it enters the battlefield, whether it was cast from hand, reanimated, cheated into play, cast from the command zone. It does not matter. Unlike her older and really solid father figure Zakama Primal Calamity, a card that specifically said if you cast it as part of its ETB trigger to make it somewhat less abusable. You can't reanimate or flicker Zakama. You can reanimate or flicker Ghalta. Many people were surprised to see no restriction on this. It'd just be a solid ETB effect. So in today's video, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about a lot of ways you can abuse the ever-loving beep out of Ghalta's big payoff as she enters the battlefield. So buckle up and prepare to become the green player your mother warned you about. But first, if you're looking to pick up singles or sealed product, Cool Stuff Inc. is your place to go. There's a link in the description below. If you use the code KENOBI at checkout, you get 5% off your first order. And a big shout out to another sponsor of the channel, Elgato. Elgato sponsor all the videos that I make and help support me with the streams that I do as well through their wonderful gear. I've been using their gear for years to support my streams and content long before I was ever sponsored by them. Utilizing the Wave XLR and its software, the Stream Decks to control my computer's sound levels, stream screens, transitions, sound effects and light levels in my office. And I guess this is also an ad for my Twitch too, because like I said, I Twitch stream every Monday night at 7 PM BST. But recently I started to use the Elgato stuff to help with my editing workflow, putting my most used hotkeys and macros onto a separate screen on the Stream Deck and utilizing it as a separate touchpad whilst editing to make things comfortable and easy. If you want to pick up any of Elgato's wonderful products to help improve your workflow or just improve your content or office space, use the link in the description below and it helps to support the show. Now let's talk about big fucking dinosaurs. And when we're talking about big fucking dinosaurs, and Ghalta in particular, I just want to take a moment to shout out to Kirsty. UK judge and all-round good person, regular on my Discord back in the day, she was once told that a sexy topless Liliana altar were no different to the average depictions of Ghalta. That's right, a man on Facebook told a woman that they should not be upset or pissed off with titty altars at the local game store or at a GP because Ghalta doesn't wear a bra. We really do live in a society.
Bang!
Tits out for Ghalta is the new social movement that I want to be part of. It's just like Free the Nipple, but you're using a big dinosaur to excuse why you're taking titty altars to your local game store. Anyway, some of you are probably writing in the comment section already,
I didn't come here for your politics, Vince.
and for the people that are writing that, you know what? Fuck off. To the rest of you, let's get right up in some dinosaur cheeks. Ghalta already has a good rate of stats. 8 mana for a 12/12 with some baked-in evasion is pretty dope. Her previous versions were cost reduced by already having a big board, which felt like a bit win more in some circumstances when we saw her. She was a certified top, topping your mana curve, you dirty-minded pervert. And then came Ghalta and Mavrin. This version of Ghalta literally birthed dinosaurs and vampires, insinuating that somehow Mavrin and Ghalta are a canonical and incredibly fertile couple. We all know a subsection of our friends that were super into this. A small part of the Magic community that fetishizes dinosaur vampire breeding. And you know what? More power to you. I don't want to yuck anyone's yum or kink shame anyone. I just don't want to discuss the logistics of how that works. So new Ghalta has more in common with birthing Ghalta than she has with top Ghalta. But instead of going to combat to progress your game plan, we instead get to do it with the enters the battlefield trigger, and any Magic player who's worth half their salt will tell you enter the battlefield triggers are easy to abuse. And her ETB is dramatically powerful. It's not broken, but it will be backbreaking quite often. Show and Tell and Eureka have both seen quite a bit of play throughout Magic's lifetime, and these effects allow players to cheat things out, but it's symmetrical, allowing all players to get access to things in their hands for cheap and early on in the game. The symmetry is often broken in those circumstances by just having better stuff in your hand. You know you're casting a Show and Tell, Hypergenesis or Eureka, so you have like Eldrazi and in this case big dinosaurs in your hand, and your opponent doesn't. But in the case of Ghalta, she isn't doing this. She's doing it as a one-sided effect for you. Ghalta's doing their best impression of an elvish piper on a 4-day crack bender who wants to have a fist fight outside a kebab shop at 3 AM in the morning. No one benefits from this behavior, least of all the person involved. So what are we going to do with Ghalta? Well, the flaw is that you make a 12-12 and you slap face with it, but if that's all you're doing, something has gone horribly wrong. The most basic bitch way of doing this is to fill your hand with fatties and play a Ghalta. This is your Vorinclexes, your Nixplamations, your Woodfall Primuses. It's pick your fatty and pick your poison, but it's not rather interesting. But if we are in mono green and we're putting Ghalta in the command zone as our starting point, I would like to talk about Greater Good. You cast Ghalta, you let her resolve, she enters the battlefield, and we place her trigger up on the stack. And maybe at this point you only have 1 or 2 fatties in hand. So before we resolve the trigger, we're going to sacrifice her to Greater Good, which allows us to draw 12 cards and discard 3, giving us 12 more chances to draw some solid fatties that we're going to put into play off Ghalta. Once this is resolved, we can then resolve the Ghalta ability and put into play any creatures, the ones that were in our hand when we first cast the Ghalta, and the ones that came into our hand thanks to the Greater Good trigger. You can really fuck around with Ghalta's trigger, more on that in a moment. If we aren't playing solely green here, there are ways to push this a little bit further by sacrificing Ghalta and then reanimating off some of the cards we hit from drawing off of the Greater Good. We could have a Karmic Guide, a Sister Hospitaller, a Young Necromancer coming into play and putting Ghalta back onto the battlefield and giving us another trigger. Now there's a chance this trigger will be useless now because you've essentially bent over and defecated all of your value onto your playmat. You've shit out your hand. A ton of big, fat, I was going to say gelatinous, I don't know why, gelatinous fatties. But at the very least, you get the 12-12 with Trample. However, there are ways to abuse a second trigger. If we put into play Regal Force, which draws us a ton of cards of all the green creatures we have in play, or a similar card advantage creature, maybe a Mole Drifter if we go on the basic end of things, or up to a Sphinx of Uthun if we want to fact or fiction off of this. These things will draw us more cards that if we then get a second Ghalta trigger, we can then put into play off of that trigger as well. Beyond card draw, we can tutor with Recruiter of the Guard, for instance, to go get the aforementioned Karmic Guide, or we can use a Fierce Empath to net us any big old 6 mana or higher fatty that we want. But we want a second copy of that Ghalta trigger, don't we? Well, there's a few ways to do that. The easiest way to do that is with Gandalf the White, or Panharmonicon, or Mummy Elishnorn, and that allows us to double the enter battlefield trigger. So we put the card advantage creatures in off the first trigger, and then put the stuff we find off the card advantage in with the second trigger. They go on the stack and they resolve. So we resolve the first one, put some cool shit into play, because it says put any number, not all, any number. You can put some in and hold some back for the second one if you really wanted to. But that kind of just builds itself, right? Double ETB triggers isn't hard to figure out. But what if we add some bouncy bounce, like a weird dinosaur bouncy castle? Both Erratic Portal and Crystal Shard allow you to bounce your own creature back to your hand for 1 mana. So if we get Ghalta into play off of either ramping into it or reanimating or whatever we do with it, we place her trigger on the stack, and then with the trigger on the stack we hold priority and we bounce Ghalta back to our hand. We resolve the first Ghalta trigger, which puts Ghalta into play, and maybe one of our tutor cards or one of our card advantage cards, and there's now a second trigger on the stack from Ghalta. So Ghalta comes in, she makes a trigger, we bounce it back to our hand, we resolve the trigger, putting Ghalta back in with a load of fatties, triggering Ghalta again. We put Ghalta on the stack, and then we put everything else on the stack over it, and we resolve those. We draw cards off Regal Force, we shoot off the Karmic Guide, whatever, not the Karmic Guide, the Recruiter of the Guard, or whatever. Then we resolve the Ghalta trigger, putting all that stuff into play. You get double triggers of Ghalta by bouncing her back to your hand, and then putting her back in off of her own trigger. It's pretty cool. Ultimately, a lot of this is going pretty damn deep on Ghalta herself. I think she is stronger in a multicolour deck where instead of having her in the command zone, we look to utilise her as part of our fatty cheating engine package. I think outside of all the cute shit we're doing, she's going to be best in 2 particular places. Sneak Attack allows you to slam Ghalta into play for 1 red mana, temporarily, so she can attack for 1 turn and do a happy slappy time, but her friends that she brings with her with the ETB effect that puts other things from your hand into play, they will remain after she's finished sneaking and goes to the bin. You will sacrifice her end of turn, but keep all the things she put into play. But that bin she's going to, that's probably where she best belongs. Any deck that is looking to dump fatties in the graveyard and reanimate them is going to want a Ghalta as a tool. Let's say you have a handful of fatties and a reanimator spell in your hand. You got 3 egregiously horrible creatures that no one wants to see, and a reanimator spell, and you need a way to put one of those in your graveyard so you can reanimate it. Any deck looking to dump fatties in the graveyard and reanimate them is going to want a Ghalta as part of their toolkit. Let's say you have a hand of fatties and a reanimator spell, and you're trying to draw or find a card that allows you to put one of those fatties in your bin so you can reanimate it. And then you draw Entomb. Now, if you entomb Ghalta, Stampede, Tyrant into your graveyard, reanimate it, all those fatties that are rotting in your hand right now that you're trying to find a way to put into the graveyard can now be put into play off of Ghalta. She allows you to empty your low gas hand that is missing some of the combo pieces every animated deck might want. Beyond that, if Ghalta is one of the fatties in hand and you're looking to discard one of them to reanimate, and you can't decide which one's the best option, you can discard a Ghalta, reanimate it, and just put the rest of the fatties into play as well. Ghalta serves as a super cheat for the decks that want to cheat shit into play. To go full circle back to the comparison to Show and Tell with Ghalta, Stampede, Tyrant, if you Show and Tell Ghalta in, and everyone else Show and Tells one thing in, you get to trigger Ghalta once you've Show and Telled her in, and put the rest of your hand into play, which is quite impressive. Ghalta even pushes Show and Tell to be more powerful than Show and Tell. She's a one-sided cheat factory that only Eureka or Hypergenesis could dream of being. To go back to that analogy of an elvish crack piper, she's just like that. She's a toxic enabler. I hope you've enjoyed this video talking about some of the stupid shit you can do with Ghalta. Let me know if you think there's something that I've missed that's really fun you can do with the Stampede Tyrant in the comment section below. And don't forget to check out the links in the description for both Elgato and Cool Stuff Inc., big sponsors of the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ta for now.